It all started with the dream. And in that dream, I was selling my soul to the devil. In return, he'd be my servant for whatever I wanted. And everything was going pretty sweet. Whatever I wished for, he would do. Whatever I asked for, he would get. Everything was pretty cash money with the guy. So I had the bright idea. I was working on a weed eater, and I thought, you know what? Let's test the devil's skills. I said, fix this weed eater. And to my surprise, his diagnostic skills were nothing I have ever seen before. He knew what screws to unscrew. He knew what things to touch. He knew what tuning to do on the carburetor without ever hearing it. And sure enough, when he started the weed eater, it started, easy. And then when he hit the gas on the throttle, it just went and didn't die, and it idled, which I guess is really tough. None of that was a problem. And I was just so blown away with what the devil did. I feel that I saw the greatest diagnostic performance in small engine history. And then I woke up. And I tried to remember exactly what the devil did, and I needed something to work on so I can do what the devil did to that weed eater. And then I found a weed eater on the street. So I was on a walk and I found this Ryobi 4-stroke weed eater on the side of the street that needed a little bit of love. It was kind of beat up. Obviously, the primer bulb was busted. The gas tank had a hole in it. But I put gas where the butterfly valve is, and sure enough, the thing fired right up. So I said, let's do it. Let's fix this thing, and let's give this what it needs. Again, I want to try to see if I can match the devil's performance. So the first thing we did is we cleaned it. And after that, I decided to go through the steps. checked valve clearance, which turns out you need a special feeler gauge for. So all I did was just make sure that there was clearance on all the valves, which there was. Ended up doing the oil. And then we cleaned up that carburetor, which everything was going really nice. After that, we fixed up the fuel tank, and what I did is I have a soldering little needle, and all you do is melt the plastic, and I got a white zip tie, and any additional plastic I needed, I was able to use that white zip tie. And then the simple test of covering up the two holes where the fuel line goes and kind of blowing into where the fuel goes, just to make sure it holds air, which after a couple of tests, sure enough. Everything seemed like it was going really smooth. So after putting it all back together, we decided to give it a test run. And that's where the problem started. Yeah, so the carburetor seemed to have just flooded. So it started, ran, and then died. And then all of a sudden, gas was just pouring out of it. And it looks like it came from the primer bulb area. So something I have ran into with these Ryobis is the primer bulb function seems to have an air leak between that, and then there's a vacuum hole that actually pulsates off of crankcase vacuum, and that's what runs the fuel pump. For some reason, air in the priming system seems to escape there, which turns into a gas leak. So it's something with Ryobi carburetors. They suck, which is going to be the moral of the story about Ryobi products in general. I did have a replacement one. That it was an aftermarket. Can't even remember the brand. Some Chinese thing. I put it on and I ran it. Sure enough, like after some time, it was leaking too. Like it wasn't really holding the fuel. So thinking, everything else seems to be pretty good, I went out and got a HIPAA carb for it. I think that they're good carburetors. I've used them before, and usually you don't have to mess around with it too much. Just a little tuning and everything's good. So I threw that on and tried tuning it. And one of the problems I was having is I just couldn't get it to throttle up. It would die, or if I release the throttle, it would just die. And that was going to be one of the big problems that I had or have with this weed eater. Like you just can't tune it. And so I decided we need to look into those valves. So I did find like a steel valve clearance gauge, and it was really interesting. It says 10 on there, but it's really like a 4.5 thou gauge. And after doing some research, it did take some research to find what the clearance is for this Ryobi, the C430, is that what it is? It's actually between 6 and 8, so 6 and 8 thousandths. So what I ended up doing is taking the gauge, I folded it in half, and I got it to about, it was like 8.5 thou. Not a big deal. And so I took my time, adjusted the valves, and made sure that those were in clearance. And that did make a big difference in terms of runnability, particularly when when you first started it. I tried testing. I just wanted to run it. Maybe could have just been a dirty cylinder or whatnot. It never fixed itself. My next thought was the coil. And I looked up at Amazon, and they had an aftermarket one for this unit, some Chinese one. I think it was about 15 or 16 bucks. And we ordered it. So I'm gonna go slap it on. Open up the weed eater, which actually takes a lot more effort than I thought it would to get to all of that stuff. You can see it when you take off the cover, but you have to take the whole front assembly off to actually remove the coil. So it turned into a little bit more work than I thought, which isn't a big deal. But I got pretty deep into it, and when I went to go put the coil on, it wasn't the right size. So what I did was turn off the camera and decided to kind of whittle it down and see if I can get it to fit, which I don't suggest doing. But I ended up getting it on, and somewhat in clearance, somewhat. And I put it on, and it ran horribly. So it was actually worse, which does tell me that there's an electrical issue going on. I think, you know what? Maybe the coil is out of adjustment. When I took it off, I never even checked it. So I did that, and I went to go fire it up. And it ran really, really good for about 5 minutes. Yeah, and so that's telling me the electrics in what I believe is a bad coil. The resistance is raising when it gets warm. So that told me I need to get not only a new coil, but an OEM coil. And so that's where I am now. So let's get set up, throw that on, and see if that finally fixes this weed eater. All right, so that should probably solve most of the carburetor issues. One is getting that air filter actually used in there, and then being able to adjust it while you use it. That's obviously one of the big cons with this setup. It's not made for people to use, you know, like to mess with and adjust. But this cut I made looks pretty good. It obviously still, it seals the air coming in. And also something that it does have a problem with is the crankcase ventilation in the back. That has a lot of oil that comes out of it. And if you're running no air filter, it's really easy to foul your spark plug with such oily air. So you do want some sort of blockage from that oily air just being sucked right into the combustion chamber and fouling up that plug. So this is probably going to be our best bet at having this thing work. So if this doesn't work, then I don't know what will.